Thanks a lot, Ken Corla. So we're 14 hours at the moment, precisely, from the placing of pickets on hospitals right across the country as part of the nurses' strike. The fact that that strike is happening is an indication of the crises that exist in the health service, the crises in which the nurses are at the front line of, and a scenario whereby their wages are completely inadequate, and they suffer from pay inequality, have a lack of pay parity, and they cannot survive considering the cost of living increases, in particular housing. And that strike looks as if it's going to go ahead. But we're also only 1 week since we had a day-long strike of 500 paramedics in the ambulance services. And I was on the picket line last Tuesday with those workers, as were many of my colleagues. And I can report back to the government that there is huge public support, a lot of people beeping, indicating their support for the strike. I can report back that those who were organised in SIP2, paramedics, refused to cross the picket line, and the strike was incredibly successful. And if the government don't know, I can tell them that they gave reports of the kind of working conditions that they face that are very difficult. Again, they're underpaid, and they're at the very front line of an under-resourced health service, dealing with people at first point of contact in very difficult circumstances. They have very difficult jobs in reality. But what this strike is about, what 98% of them voted for strike action about, is extremely simple. They're part of NASRA, the National Ambulance Service Representative Association, which is a part of the PNA. And those 500 workers, who make up a significant portion of the ambulance workers, the HSE refuses to engage with their union. They refuse to engage with the union of choice of these workers. It's outrageous that a public sector employer would refuse to engage, and it gives a green light for private sector employers to engage in the sort of union busting we've seen. So the government should give a commitment.
Smith is 2 minutes.
Minister, at the end of the week there will be an announcement made by NASRA, who are a branch of the Psychiatric Nurses Association, on the future days of action they will be taking, and one of those will be a 2 days continuous strike. Now, without the government wishing to give itself more grief on the question of the health services, I think that this dispute could be very simply ended without costing anyone a penny, except the paramedics and ambulance drivers themselves, because then they could properly pay their union dues. For 7 years, the HSE deducted union dues for members of NASRA. NASRA have 500 to 600 members out of a staff of 12 to 1,300, so about 50% of the membership of the paramedic and ambulance service nationally are members of NASRA, and for 7 years the HSE formally recognised them by deducting their fees. And then last year they stopped taking any new people who joined NASRA at deductions of source. You know exactly what I'm referring to. Being a long-in-the-tooth trade unionist like myself, you know exactly what I mean. And then in August they ceased all deductions for NASRA. So they have provoked and manipulated a situation where they have goaded these workers into a dispute because they are refusing to deal with them. They suspended 4 of their members in Cork last week who refused to work for a continuous 20 hours because they said it would be against their health and safety. Now, those members have been reinstated. But, Minister, I put it to you, and you as somebody who fought for trade union rights as long as you did, it is not your decision. It is not Simon Harris's decision. It is not the HSE's decision. It's not my decision who represents them and what union they join, and when they walk into a meeting, whom they take with them to act on their behalf as members of a trade union. It is their decision and it is their right. And in a Liberal government that talks a lot about choice and moving forward and all the rest of it, the very least they could do is give these workers their right to be recognised and join the trade union of their choice, not your choice, not mine. And all that Simon Harris and the HSE are doing is causing more havoc in the health service by refusing them that right.
I'm taking this debate on behalf of Minister Simon Harris. First of all, I want to thank Deputy Paul Murphy and Deputy Bríd Smith for raising this very important issue here today. Industrial action was taken on Tuesday 22nd of January between 7 AM and 5 PM by a branch of the Psychiatric Nurses Association called the National Ambulance Service Representative Association, as NASRA, as already mentioned. The PNA held a meeting of their executive on Friday last, the 25th of January, to determine their course of action. Media reports are stating that NASRA members intend to go on 2 more strikes on consecutive days, the dates of which are yet to be announced. I understood that the NAS have yet to receive formal notification of these strikes. NASRA represents around approximately 350 frontline ambulance personnel out of a total National Ambulance Service workforce of 1,800. They are mostly based in Cork, the South East and Tullamore. NASRA advised that their members would not be providing inter-hospital transport and patient transport in the intermediate care service for the duration of the action. The HSE were advised that full emergency cover would be provided during the action. This meant that all emergency calls would be responded to. In addition, the National Ambulance Service put robust contingency arrangements in place to provide additional emergency cover. The Defence Forces were also on standby if required. The intention was to minimise any disruption and to ensure that patient safety is not compromised. The NAS responded to over 600 calls by 5 p.m. These include a number of hospital transfers, over 70 intermediate care calls and 2 helicopter call-outs. There were 12 calls involving Army personnel. The situation was closely monitored by the NAS management until 8 p.m. NAS have confirmed that there was no negative impact on their ability to provide patient care and service delivery. This is due to the implementation of their contingency plan. The PNA state that their industrial action is in connection with the following: a dispute over automated deduction of union subscriptions from members' pay. The HSE is refusing to facilitate payroll deductions at source of union subscriptions to NASRA, as it does not recognise NASRA, and refusal by the HSE to engage in negotiations with the PNA or to recognise the PNA as union representatives when representing its ambulance service personnel members. I think it's important again to state the factual position in relation to this dispute. The National Ambulance Service Representative Association, which is affiliated with the PNA, is a group which is not recognised by the HSE and therefore does not have negotiation rights. Also, the PNA does not have negotiation rights for ambulance personnel. The legal position is very, very clear. The HSE and the National Ambulance Service have no obligation to recognise NASRA or the PNA for ambulance personnel. The PNA, which is a non-ICTU affiliated union, does have negotiating rights for nurses working in psychiatry and intellectual disability sectors. The main union which is recognised by the HSE for frontline grades is SIPTU. FORSA and Unite also represent ambulance grades. The HSE deducts subscriptions at source for those ambulance staff that are members of SIPTU, FORSA and Unite. This is consistent with the fact that there are unions that are recognised as representing ambulance grades. The HSE does not carry out deductions for subscriptions to NASRA, as it is not recognised. It should be noted that the matter of facilitating deductions at source is not a legal right, rather it is a concession granted to recognise unions. As far as the government is concerned, there are sufficient unions already available to ambulance staff, as it does not intend to recognise this group. Of course, individuals have a right to membership of any trade union. However, they do not have a right to such a membership as is facilitated or recognised by their employer. Thank you, Carla.
Deputy Paul Murphy,
It's a scandalous answer by the Minister on behalf of the Government. To quote him, as far as the Government is concerned, there are sufficient unions already available to ambulance staff. As my colleague Deputy Smith said, well, we don't care what the Government thinks about which unions workers should be in. The workers decided that their membership of SIPTU was not sufficient and they set up NASRA. That's their right to do so. 500, not 350, 500 of them are in NASRA. And it is outrageous that a public sector employer would not negotiate, would not deal with the union of choice of its workers. It's absolutely scandalous. And what message does it send to employers like Lloyds, to Tesco's, etc. It sends a message that the government is actively going to encourage the kind of union-busting, derecognition tactics that are going on. It's scandalous, and anyone who would call themselves a trade unionist and would participate in such a government and would stand over such a line would be making a big mistake. I'd say the HSE is making a big mistake. They're opening up, and they're going to be faced with two different fronts, where they're taking on the nurses on the one hand, and on the other hand, Nazareth would be absolutely correct to take further action.
Deputy Smith.
Yeah, Minister, your response is full of holes and it is full of spin. You spend a lot of time in this cabinet on your spin. There are over 500 members of Nazareth in the paramedic and ambulance service. This figure obviously relates to what the HSE gave you because they refused to take new members in the last year. But new members have been joining because they're not happy with the current representation. And the fact that it is only 350, albeit that it were, has absolutely nothing to do with the discussion. Unite, which is recognised, has 100 paramedics nationally in that union. This has absolutely nothing to do with the discussion, so the spin you're putting on it is quite outrageous. What I'm really shocked by is the sentence that says, as far as the government is concerned, there are sufficient unions already available and it does not intend to recognise this group. I understood it was the decision of the HSE, according to earlier discourse and according to what the union have told us. Now we have it in black and white. It is the government that is blocking the recognition of these workers. And as the strike escalates, and it will, let it be on your head, just like the nurses' strike is on your head and the scandal in the Children's Hospital is on your head. This government is outrageous when it comes to health.
Again, I want to say, and I'd like to say how disappointing it is that the PNA has decided to take industrial action. While it's a key role for our ambulance service in providing emergency medical cover, they're also fundamental to the provision of inter-hospital transport and patient transport in the intermediate care service. I think it's important again to state that the position in relation to this dispute, the National Ambulance Service Representative Association, which is affiliated with the PNA, is a group which is not recognised by the HSE and therefore does not have negotiating rights. Also, the PNA does not have negotiating rights for ambulance personnel. The legal position is very clear. The HSE and the National Ambulance Service have no obligation to recognise NASRA or PNA for ambulance personnel. The National Ambulance Service is committed to maintaining positive industrial relations with all staff and are fully satisfied that ambulance personnel are adequately represented through the agreed and recognised industrial relations process that exists within the health sector. But of course I will raise the points you raised today in the debate with Minister Simon Harris as well.